And so I will ask our next speaker to join me on the stage here. Um, and if you're around, please, Leah. The topic is strategic narrative, how to drive unity and inspiration through a strategic narrative. How you
Yeah,
doing,
that's right.
Leah?
I'm doing well. How are you? Sorry, I made a small guest appearance a few seconds ago.
The teaser. It was the teaser, a trailer. All
Yes.
right. Let's see. Can you share your slides? Let's see if the tech is working. I'll provide any assistance if needed.
Yes. How's that looking?
It's looking promising. All righty. Thank you so
Excellent.
much. I'll join you in 20 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So hi everyone, I'm Leah, and today we're going to be spending a little bit of time talking about how to drive unity and inspiration through a strategic narrative. So before we dive in, a little bit about me. I've been in product marketing for mostly B2B SaaS companies for a little over a decade now, coming originally from a more general marketing background. I currently work at Gusto as the head of product marketing for accountants. I've been there for about 2.5 years, and I live in beautiful sunny Denver, Colorado. All right, so let me advance the slide. Great. So what is a strategic narrative? Let's start with a shared understanding of what a strategic narrative is. At its core, a strategic narrative is a story that explains who you are as a company. It expounds the company's mission, defines the vision, and is rooted in the culture. It covers where you've been, where you are, and where you're going. It explains why it exists and also what makes you unique. So, why is a strategic narrative important? As humans, we are moved by stories. It has been part of our tradition since the dawn of time. Stories connect and persuade us. And when you hear a compelling story, you get mentally transported to another time, another place, and into another person's shoes, to a state where you can kind of suspend belief in the now and indulge in visions of the future. It's an incredibly powerful tool. So Uri Hassan, who's a professor of psychology and neuroscience at Princeton, he was studying the effects of stories, and he was looking at MRIs of participants' brains as one person was told a story and the other person listened. And when he did this, he and a team of researchers realized that when we hear stories unfold, our brain waves actually start to synchronize with those of the storyteller. In fact, they found that the greater the listener's comprehension, the more closely the brainwave patterns mirrored those of the storyteller, which is pretty incredible. I remember when I read about that the first time, and it actually gave me goosebumps to think about just the power of story and human connection in that capacity. So you want a story that's going to inspire your employees, that's going to excite your partners, attract customers, and engage influencers. A story that is concise but comprehensive, one that's specific but has room to grow, and one that defines the company's vision, communicates the strategy, and embodies the culture. Just a short order, nothing really too complex. And research shows that companies whose members have a clear understanding of where the organization is headed and how their daily activities contribute to the success of the organization, they consistently outperform the competition. And we're all operating in landscapes that are probably fairly competitive. And so it's a really important tool for us to be able to utilize. So by telling the story, employees and other stakeholders, they'll understand their place in the larger narrative and how they can take action and take an active role in shaping the future of your organization. All right, so how do you actually go about developing and sustaining an effective strategic narrative? Because it's not just enough to develop a strategic narrative. You have to figure out how to make that actually live and be embodied by people in your organization. So I think there's really 5 key elements. The first of which is encouraging co-creation. I think it comes as no surprise that leaders and teams in your organization are going to be far more likely to act like owners and see it as part of their job to be active in the narrative if they've had a chance to contribute to its creation. So identify those leaders that will play a key role in bringing the narrative to life and that will help weave the narrative into the way people at the company talk and the way that they tell their own stories and involve them from the outset. This might be folks from your product marketing team, your comms teams, other folks that are within marketing, people that really focus on storytelling as part of their jobs, but also don't forget to include people that are key cultural influencers, people that, whatever their role is in the company, that folks tend to look up to and listen to at the company, because they can also play a really key role in making sure that everyone at your company lives and breathes this in their day-to-day work. All right, so second is base it on a narrative structure. Storytelling is an art, but it also has an underlying structure that makes it effective. It should answer key questions about the journey your company is on. And a simple framework you can use is, where are you now as a company? Where do you want to get to? And how will you get there? The narrative will link together events in a continuous journey. The third is to make it straightforward and simple, kind of building on some of the concepts we just heard about. So write less and say more. Oftentimes, writing that's longer and hasn't been meticulously crafted is going to be longer. Interrogate your words to make sure the story is tight, that it's easy to understand and uses that simple language. And it's just simple. Making it needlessly long or complex will make it less memorable and thus less effective. All right, so fourth, articulate the role of employees. And I think this is so critical. While leaders will set the narrative, vision, and strategy, the hard work required to overcome the obstacles and create the future is done by each and every person at the organization. Engage and energize employees by articulating the key role that they are going to play in help making the vision a reality. The crucial role they play means they are in a position to be the heroes in the story. So position them as such, because that will make everyone feel energized and engaged and feel good about the role that they play. And it's just going to help the strategic narrative really come to life. All right, and fifth, keep the story alive. Like I said, it is not just enough to create it. You really have to figure out how to make this part of the company's day-to-day operations and DNA. As a very wise person once said, repetition doesn't ruin the prayer. People in your organization will need to hear the story many times in many ways to have it become part of the company's ethos. Find ways to reinforce the narrative via internal communications, and empower and equip leaders in the organization to reference the narrative in their interactions with their teams. While some elements of the story will need to stay the same, that way they are consistent, having elements that can be flexible so the story can be told from multiple ways, from different perspectives, that will help keep the narrative fresh, interesting, and with a bit of welcomed depth and nuance. And incorporate it into how you talk about achieving success as a company, as a team, and as individuals, so that people understand how the work that they do day in, day out helps the company on its journey to bring towards that future and to help the company fulfill its destiny. All right, so what are the key elements of a strategic narrative? First is going to be a vision with a shared purpose. In their book, Built to Last, James Collins and Jerry Porras identified that companies that create enduring success have clear purpose and an envisioned future. The purpose helps us as employees reaffirm why we are part of the organization, why we joined, and why we continue to choose to show up every day and do the work. An envisioned future should inspire us with what we can achieve together. It should also help us understand the benefits we can achieve for our customers, for our fellow employees, for the business, the shareholders, and the community by collectively mobilizing to achieve our goal. The cornerstone of the strategic narrative is a shared purpose. This shared purpose is the outcome that you, everyone at your company, and your customers are working towards together. It's more than what you deliver to customers or the value it provides. It's about the journey that you're on together and what you choose to do when you achieve it. By having a shared purpose, the relationship begins to shift from consumer to co-creator. All right, so as an example, Gusto, the company I work for, we are a people platform. We offer an all-in-one solution for payroll, benefits, and HR to growing businesses. Our mission is to create a world where work empowers a better life. And you can see that there's a shared purpose that we invite all of our customer segments to join us in fulfilling. So whether you're an employer that uses Gusto to pay and provide benefits to your employees, a team member working for that employer and getting your pay and benefits through Gusto, or an accountant helping advise that employer, you can play a really critical role. Work empowers a better life when work provides financial stability, where it provides meaning and a sense of connection, where we feel we get paid a fair wage and have the work-life balance that we need to take care of our families and our communities, where we have the basics like health insurance covered to give us peace of mind, and where we feel energized and valued by our coworkers, where we support and celebrate one another's success. And we all are involved in that creation. We all impact how our coworkers and communities experience work. From key roles like those of someone on the people team or HR team that determine benefits and compensation, to being an engaged voter and impacting legislation that improves workplaces, or simply showing up and being proud of the way that you support your coworkers, we can create a world where work empowers a better life. And that's Gusto's shared purpose with our customers, with our employees, and with the communities we live in, work in, and support. All right, so second up, play to the hearts and play to the minds. For the narrative to be effective, people need to see the logic behind the journey and how the company will actually get to its future state. But it also needs to incorporate that human emotional dimension that plays to the hearts of all those involved. Gusto started as a payroll company, but over the years, we've expanded our capabilities immensely, evolving into a people platform that's now proud to offer benefits and HR solutions. With Gusto, not only can you pay your hardworking team, but you can also take care of them in a broader sense too, because it requires more than just a paycheck to really achieve well-being. A Stanford graduate business study found that the primary causes of stress in life are lack of health insurance, the constant threat of layoffs, lack of autonomy in decision-making, long working hours, low levels of organizational justice, and unrealistic demands. In Augusto, we help employers solve for some of these stresses through our low-cost, no-cost premium benefits offering. We offer health insurance at various price points and tools that help create a great place to work. We offer a team insights report, which shows aggregated answers to an employee happiness survey that you can automate after you set it up. And employers can easily view and navigate through this report to see how their team ranks across employee happiness, morale, or retention, benefits, and management. So leaders will be able to see trends like this over time, spot problems that lead to stress, like lack of autonomy and decision-making, long working hours, low levels of organizational justice, and unrealistic demands. So we're a mission and customer-driven company, and we place a really high value on those customer stories. Those customer stories that help highlight how the products that we build and the services we offer impact real people's lives. So reinforcing our strategic narrative through these customer stories helps bring them to life, playing to both the hearts and the minds, adding depth, adding element of human connection and empathy, amping up the power of that emotional pull. And that is something we do at almost every all hands we have at Gusto. And we have all hands probably about 20 times per year. So our Gusties, our Gusto employees, they're constantly getting to hear those stories on an almost bi-weekly basis. All right, third is going to be authentic tie-ins to your brand's DNA. A strategic narrative must align with this brand DNA, or it will be perceived as inauthentic. To find your brand DNA, go back to the original vision and ethos of the founding of the company. While it tends to need to be authentic and based in the current reality, it also needs to be forward-looking, encouraging an evolution from the organization and articulating the challenges that it faces. The contrast between the present and the future and the tension in figuring out how to overcome the challenges creates that dramatic interest in the story. Our strategic narrative works for us because it's pretty authentic. We're fortunate to have that because not all companies do have such an authentic reason that they were founded. And if you've ever had the pleasure of hearing Josh Reeves, one of our co-founders and our CEO, speak, you can really hear in the way that he talks about our business and our customers and the communities that we impact. You can hear how wanting to create positive change for humans, kindness, dignity, and respect and continual improvement have been part of the company's DNA since day one. All right, so another example is Patagonia. Their founding values were to build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, use business to protect nature, and not to be bound by convention. These values reflect a business that was started by a band of climbers and surfers and the minimalist style they promoted. And as you can see, their values manifest in everything they do, including their advertising. They are really living those values. What other brands do you know that tell customers not to buy their products? That is really not being bound by convention, to cause no unnecessary harm and protect nature. While other brands might be able to match Patagonia's products, no other brands out there can match their narrative. All right, so what is the value of a strategic narrative? We've kind of skimmed the surface of this in the why, but to start to dive a little bit deeper, the value of a strategic narrative is to unite people behind a shared purpose. Stories have been used throughout time to unite societies and give them a common purpose and direction. A strategic narrative can do the same for businesses, leading to greater alignment. We've all experienced situations where different leaders or departments have disparate goals or strategies guiding what they work on. This misalignment creates confusion and it slows the organization down. It's hard to be nearly as innovative and move quite as quickly in a data-backed way if you've got misalignment in what you're trying to achieve. But by contrast, when leaders are brought into the strategic narrative from the beginning and they help in that co-creation element, the resulting alignment creates clarity and momentum for progress. People feel like they're united in what they're working on, and they can see that shared vision, and they take pride in helping the company achieve a collective goal, which enhances teamwork and camaraderie. And when you build it into things like objective setting and OKRs, that can really give a sense to people what they're achieving and how their individual work is really helping ladder up to those larger level goals at the team level, at the department level, and then at the company level. Articulate the vision and need for change. Employees are much more likely to help create the change articulated in the vision if they understand why things need to change from the beginning. So be able to really talk about why where you are now, standing stagnant, won't create the vision for the future that you need to achieve as a company. The benefits change will create and their role in the overall journey, that's going to really create that employee inspiration and action. This is going to lead to greater commitment and effort from them. Help set priorities and guide decision-making. A strategic vision can help employees understand what is ultimately important for the company. When they're in the process of planning, determining how they will spend their time, the strategic narrative can act as guideposts. If a project helps achieve the vision, it should likely be prioritized above those that don't. And so employees can have this in mind when not only are they doing, planning, whether that's on an annual basis, biannual basis, or quarterly basis, but they can also use that as a decision-making framework in their day-to-day. If they come to an impasse, they're looking at their plate, they're seeing it's too full, and they're trying to figure out, okay, how do I self-serve into figuring out what my priorities are and what might need to fall below the cut line? This can be a really effective way for them to figure that out. And finally, connect the dots between initiatives. At any given time, companies are engaged in a plethora of projects. And sometimes it's hard for employees to see how each of those disparate projects connect and how they ladder up to an overall mission for the company. And the strategic narrative can give leadership an opportunity to thread the needle between those different priorities that the company has set forth, helping employees zoom out of their day-to-day work and see that bigger picture and that connect the dots between those various work streams. All right, so I hope you all have found something today illuminating and learned at least a few new things as it relates to a strategic narrative, the components and the benefits it creates for your organizations. So thanks so much, and I would love to get the conversation started.
Awesome, thank you so much. My first question would be, in B2B, besides Gusto, who do you think is doing it well?
I will say that in general, I think that mission-driven companies kind of have a leg up because in general, they were founded for a particular reason rather than because they saw an opportunity in the market that they wanted to act on. Usually mission-driven companies, they see an opportunity, but they've also paired that with something larger that they want to achieve. A company I recently learned about was Project Canary, and it is a company that has created, it's a very mission-driven company that's trying to get us to kind of that zero impact future for their marketing. And what they do is they create a way to measure emissions. That way, folks in oil and gas know actually the damage that they're doing to the environment when they're going out and they're drilling for oil. And so I think folks that are operating oftentimes in the environmental area are folks that are doing this well because they've figured out how they can create the world that is a better future that we all desire, and they can tie that back into the work that they're doing on a day-to-day basis. I think also folks like Asana are doing this well because it's all about team collaboration and it's all about how you can actually get your work done more quickly, stay focused more. That way you can achieve more as a company. And so I think that you see that both in how they designed their products and creating those moments of delight and celebration that help you feel inspired to keep doing the work, but also in the way that they're marketing their product.
One question about, are you familiar with Andy Raskin's work?
No, tell me about it.
Well, he's the like the leading thinker in when it comes to strategic narratives, and what he calls strategic narratives is completely something else. It's all about how do we create the context for our products. There's a new game, there's an old game, and you said like you establish a narrative. You tap into an event or a trend that is happening in the world. So, for instance, we're all going remote. After COVID, everybody's going remote, and now so you tie into that story, and and so on and so forth. So, well, that's just an aside. If you're not familiar, I'm not gonna debate you about those things. But I have a question that I get a lot: is where does the story live? Like, so on your homepage, or do you only do it in like your social media and newsletters and conference talks, or where does it live?
Yeah, well, I think what you just mentioned about Andy totally makes sense to me, because part of that strategic narrative is keeping it fresh and figuring out how it lives on. And so your narrative should change as the moment in time changes, and it should change as macro trends change, because you want to tie it into bigger things that people feel connected to, because I think that's part of what makes the storytelling compelling and unique and feels like it's fresh and evolving. So that absolutely makes sense to me. In terms of where does it live, it needs to live a lot of different places. So yes to all the things that you said. It needs to live in the way that you're telling customer stories internally. It needs to live in the way that you're putting together case studies externally. It needs to live in on your website. It needs to live in the way
Where
that you put
specifically
together.
on the website? So I go to open up the website. Like, is it above the fold? Is it where does it live, or is it sub page 27? 7 hierarchy levels down. Where on the website?
Yeah, to me, it's more about the messages of your strategic narrative being embedded throughout the content. So it's not like you're going to go to any company's website and you're going to click a drop-down menu and see, read about this company's strategic narrative. To me, it's much more about how you frame the language on your website, and it should be included. Like when you think about writing content for your website, you should be asking yourself, like, does this help tell the strategic narrative? Does this help tell the story about why we're founded, why we're here, and what we're trying to achieve, like what our better future is that we're trying to co-create with our customers and with our employees together? And so it's not really like, should it be above the fold? Yes, of course. But it's not going to be a specific page necessarily. It's more about the way that you write the content across your site and the way that you tell your customer stories. Does it help tell that strategic narrative?
Okay, so how do you do it in Gusto in very specific terms? Like if I go to gusto.com right now, there's nothing on the homepage. So where is it in Gusto's case?
Yeah, so in Gusto's case, it's going to be like in those customer stories. If you start to look at testimonials, if you start to look at case studies, if you start to look at, for example, we're creating content right now that's going to go into an event that we're putting on for our accountant customers in September. And so when we're thinking about how to frame the narrative of the day, what are the primary talk tracks? What are the customer stories that we want to be able to tell on the stage? They're all laddering up to, how does Gusto help create a world where work empowers a better life? And so it's embedded into the content. To your point, you can't go to gusto.com and click on a page that says strategic narrative. You can read about our mission and our values. You can read about how the products that we're creating do help employers and employees that they serve feel more engaged and empowered to do their best work and to create the change that they want to see in the world.
If a company doesn't have their story mapped out yet, and in B2B SaaS, like, I mean, I don't know how many mission-driven companies out there. Like, so there's no obvious, easy, low-hanging fruit, right? Like you're an ERP, you're a CRM, you're like whatever tool, live chat or live streaming software. So where do you start if you're like, holy shit, we don't have a story?
Yeah, I think I would start with, why do you believe you exist as a company? Do you believe that, for example, if you are a video streaming platform, if we think about where the world was 15 years ago when COVID hit, what sense of connection do you think companies would have been able to feel with their employees. Employees would have been able to feel with their companies if we had been forced into lockdown and we didn't have the benefit of broadly available video streaming platforms that helped us stay connected. I mean, I would argue that we wouldn't have been able to achieve the level of connection that we were able to sustain. That is not to say that it's perfect. I think, folks are feeling disconnected with good reason that have been in remote situations for the last 2.5 years. But I think we're in a far better off place than we would have been if we didn't have that. And so when you can create software that does create connection points for people, I think that's incredibly powerful. And when you're creating new ways, so if we think about like, okay, Zoom rolls out a new feature where you can show emotion. It's a lot easier to read people's emotions, for example, in person than via Zoom. And so that's a really powerful feature where you've been able to add in reactions and you've been able to add in the ability for people to better read how their message is being received. Or, for example, adding in a chat feature to video. We all know that if you're in a big conference room and you're sitting next to someone you don't really understand something, you can just lean over and say like, hey, John, what did they say? What did that mean? But in a big call on Zoom, you can't do that. But by adding in a chat feature, you now have the ability to do real-time interaction and connect with people while it doesn't disrupt the video stream. And so I think continually they're creating moments of clarity and connection through their product that, to me, it still does like tie into a broader strategic narrative about the value you're trying to deliver to companies, to their employees, and the communities that they operate in.
So in this particular example, every single live streaming company would have the same story. Does the story need to be differentiated in any way?
Yeah, and I still think you can tell that story from multiple angles. That was just where my mind originally went. But I think there's many ways that you can tell that narrative, and it should be, like I said, authentic, because if that's not why you've been founded, that is not going to really feel authentic. One of our competitors, for example, they have a very, even though they have similar products, they have a very different way of telling their story because they are much less about the human. They are much more focused on being tech forward and being innovative. And so there's an entirely different way that you can tell a very authentic story about the change that you're trying to create in the world if you put a much more tech-focused lens on a people platform versus if you put a much more people-focused lens on a people platform. And there's no wrong way, but it should tie back to your brand DNA. And those stories are going to be different even for companies operating in the same space.
Awesome. Well, Leah, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.